This is CBC Here and Now.
Good evening. We're starting once again tonight with a story that is angering a lot of people in our province. The final report from the Muskrat Falls inquiry. And in that 6-volume monster of a report, more than 1,000 pages, Justice Richard LeBlanc has painted a target on the chest of Ed Martin. But tonight, just a day after the release of this blistering report, the former Nalcor CEO is firing back. And we are also hearing from the Premier who sanctioned the troubled project more than 7 years ago. Here now's Terry Roberts reports.
Ed Martin has never backed down from adversity. And today was no different. Walking tall and unrepentant, the chief architect of Muskrat Falls walked up to our camera and unleashed a full-throttled attack on the inquiry that accuses him of using unprincipled acts to get approval for the project.
What was missing in my mind and concerned me was the overall balance of the other side of the equation.
Martin says Inquiry Commissioner Richard LeBlanc, a justice with the province's Supreme Court, took a one-sided approach. In other words, was biased. That commission lawyers like Barry Learmonth were only interested in pursuing negative hypotheses.
It's just from a one-sided perspective, and I think there should have been a much more broader view of this thing.
Despite a lengthy and expensive inquiry, with its final report largely blaming Martin for the debacle and police poised to investigate, the former Muskrat gatekeeper remains steadfast.
Oh, I'm not concerned about any criminal or civil litigation. This was all handled properly.
And denies hiding vital information about project cost and schedules from government.
I've always conducted myself ethically in the best interest of whatever project I was undertaking.
And he continues to profess his belief that Muskrat, combined with oil projects, will deliver huge benefits to the province in decades to come.
This is still the right project. The right decision was made.
But this report is now out there. So how will Martin move forward?
Same way as I've done every other day I've woken up here.
Meanwhile, the politician who was Premier at the time Muskrat was sanctioned released a statement today, saying she made every decision with integrity, and she is very satisfied that I personally kept this commitment given the information and analysis I was given, which is another way of saying she trusted the bosses at Nalcor. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Now, many are still digesting the volume of detail in Judge LeBlanc's 6-volume report. In about 30 minutes, we'll take an in-depth look at what else Ed Martin had to say today. Now, as we just heard, Martin, of course, long out as the head of Nalcor, but what about the other officials who were targeted and blasted in this report? What should happen to them? There are calls for people to be fired, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen, at least not anytime soon. Peter Cowan joins us live from our newsroom. So, Peter, who's calling for heads to roll over this?
Anthony, it's a growing list. Today we've heard from both the candidates to become Premier and in the Liberal leadership race, both saying they want to see people fired over this. We also have the two opposition leaders in agreement on this. And who are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look at a couple of the key people who are mentioned in this report. So the report was critical of Gilbert Bennett and Paul Harrington. They were both key leaders of Muskrat Falls then, and they're still key leaders of Muskrat Falls now. Charles Bone was also criticized for withholding information as the Deputy Minister of Natural Resources, and he's still a Deputy Minister today. So the opposition parties are asking, how can these people still be doing these jobs after such a scathing report?
I think the people of the province are very troubled at the idea of a group of people on the executive team who've been so severely criticized by the commissioner, as what these people have been, staying on, enjoying their fat pay packets.
These people are still working in government and still being responsible for the public purse. They are being paid out of the public purse. I think we do need to review these employment contracts and look at if there is cause for dismissal. Absolutely.
We heard from Stan Marshall yesterday that he's not looking to fire any of these people. What about government, though? Well, today we heard from the Minister of Natural Resources who says this may come, but let's not do anything too hasty.
One thing we want to make sure is that we do it properly and we do it well. So the hard part is waiting to make sure that the right processes are in place. So let's make sure the right processes are in place so that we don't find ourselves making a misstep in this.
Now, what about the bonuses that these executives earned while the government and public was being misled? Today, the Premier says he'd like to see that money recovered, but Siobhan Cody said there really isn't a mechanism to do that. They're stuck with the employment contracts that they have. Reporting live in the newsroom, I'm Peter Cowan for Here and Now.
The biggest issues there, of course, is making sure that you're balancing out the pedestrian safety with the vehicle traffic flow.
Controversial changes at a controversial intersection in St. John's are being changed. Maybe. The latest on an area that some people call Confusion Corner.
A little bit of a disturbance moved through today, brought some snow for parts of Central and the West Coast. That changed over to rain this afternoon for most of eastern Newfoundland. We're seeing that rain move through. We'll continue to do so as we head through the overnight. We've still got that cold air up through Labrador, that milder air through parts of central, or rather eastern Newfoundland, but that is going to change as we head through the day tomorrow. Some coastal snow and blowing snow for parts of Labrador. A few flurries on the way for the island, and then again, those temperatures are going to drop back down tomorrow. We're in for a little bit of a roller coaster over the next few days. I'll have all those details coming up.
Now moving on to an international, national, and local story. If there was any doubt about the seriousness of the worldwide coronavirus outbreak, that ended today. 4,300 deaths, 120,000 people infected in at least 114 countries. The World Health Organization has officially declared a pandemic.
We're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Now in this province, 44 people have been tested for the disease. The province's chief medical officer says half of those cases have been confirmed as negative. Here Now's Heather Gillis has this update.
Fever, headache, bit of congestion, bit of low energy.
Tom Davis and his wife are self-quarantined at home. Last month, they visited Italy and went on a cruise through the Mediterranean.
Yeah, trip of the lifetime.
They returned to St. John's on Thursday. On Friday, nurses wearing protective equipment came to their home to swab for COVID-19. They're still waiting for the results.
A call yesterday, they said they still didn't know and that they were checking 3 times a day.
So far, 44 people in this province have been tested for COVID-19. Half of those cases have been confirmed negative by a national laboratory in Winnipeg. The other half are still waiting to be processed.
We have no cases here as yet, right? And we do anticipate that we will see cases here.
And the threat is real. This morning, 8 employees with the Department of Natural Resources were put into self-isolation. They attended a mining conference earlier this month in Toronto, where 1 case has been confirmed. Those employees have been home for nearly a week before going into isolation.
Some of them are symptomatic, but you have to remember there's lots of flus and colds that are on the go, and that's been much more. We've had lots of people symptomatic, 44 who've been tested and who've traveled, and they've been negative.
Federal Cabinet Minister Seamus O'Regan was also at the conference. He took to Twitter to say he has symptoms and is also in self-isolation. The chief medical officer is recommending that anyone who attended the conference and is experiencing symptoms should call 811.
Individuals and families considered to be at risk for developing COVID-19 are required to self-isolate and are not permitted to attend work or school.
Meanwhile, Dr. Fitzgerald says discussions are underway with health authorities about setting up an assessment centre in the province. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
So Heather's given you the provincial and local scene. Let's look at the national picture. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's pulling out all of the stops. He's announced a $1 billion fund to deal with the spread of COVID-19. Now, half of that money will go to the provinces and territories, and there's also funding for research, medical supplies, as well as education efforts, as well as support for workers and employers.
Let me be clear. No one should have to worry about their job if they have to be quarantined. No employer should feel like they have to lay off a worker because of the virus. We can support you. and we will.
Now, for those who are affected, the government is going to waive the waiting period for employment insurance. It's also looking at additional measures, including income support for those people who are not eligible for EI sickness benefits. Well, to some other international news now. A New York judge has formally declared ex-movie mogul Harvey Weinstein a sex offender and sentenced him to 23 years in prison. Now, some call it justice and a new day for women, but Weinstein's lawyers call his trial unfair and the sentence obscene.
It's ridiculous. Harvey feels terrible. Of course he does. This is not an easy day.
For the predators who are going to wake up in fear tomorrow and say, are they coming after me next? My answer is probably yes.
Now, 2 women read victim impact statements prior to the sentencing and then greeted the ruling with smiles and raised fists. They are among dozens of accusers who started going public in 2017. Weinstein also spoke in court today, saying that he is confused by what has happened. Insiders in the Hollywood film business have since admitted that they knew about what they called Weinstein's dreadful behavior, but did nothing. The 67-year-old will be taken to prison, but his legal team is filing an appeal. Well, back to St. John's now. A high-drama showdown at City Council today about an infamous intersection turned roundabout. A motion to make the Rawlins Cross traffic circle permanent was narrowly defeated in a 5-4 vote, but the traffic lights, they're not being turned back on just yet. Here now's Mark Quinn explains why.
The goal was to make this area safer for drivers and pedestrians, and city staff says it worked. 25% fewer collisions with the new pilot project configuration. But despite that, councillors rejected the recommendation to make this traffic circle permanent. People who've been fighting to put traffic lights back up are surprised.
You know, I was concerned that the concerns of pedestrians weren't being heard and weren't being given equal weight, and I'm very pleased that pedestrians are being given equal consideration by members of the council.
It was a close vote, 5-4 against keeping the traffic circle. They voted it down even though city research concluded the new traffic circle is safer.
For me here, I think the loss of the traffic lights is a major concern. You can slow down traffic, you can reroute it, but sometimes you have to stop it just to make sure that people are safe in crossing. And this is, I believe, is one of those areas.
But these black eyesores behind me aren't out of here yet. 2 city councillors weren't at this morning's meeting, and they could overturn today's vote at the regular council meeting on Monday. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the province is paying $400 an hour defending itself against a human rights complaint. It's a complaint that concerns a deaf child whose parents have been pushing for deaf education and American Sign Language support for years. CBC's Andrew Hawthorne has this update now on the Churchill family.
If I was to say tree, road, street, house, game, would you understand that sentence? Would you even consider it English? That's what Carter Churchill experiences each day at school, with the teacher signing words at him using English grammar and syntax instead of American Sign Language. This has been his world for 3 years. The technique is called Signed Exact English, and without a full ASL speaker, it's all teachers at Beachy Cove Elementary can offer. The English School District recently claimed Churchill is doing ASL in school, leaving his parents to believe the district doesn't know the difference.
To state that he's learning American Sign Language is the furthest thing from the truth. So we found that it was quite appalling to get such a letter because it was very misleading. This letter was sent out to all parents of deaf children that were learning American Sign Language. So if you're a parent and you're not aware of how your child is being taught in school, then you might think that this is an accurate portrayal of what's happening when in fact it is not.
The Churchills lodged their first complaint about the lack of support for their son 3 years ago. Last year, they filed an official human rights complaint. That's a costly process. They say they've spent $10,000 so far, even starting a GoFundMe page to offset the cost. But the province is spending even more.
So I was curious to know how much of my own taxes are actually being used against me to fight and justify a system that continues to discriminate against my own son. And through an ATIB request and eventually an appeal to the Privacy Commissioner, I did find out that the lawyer for the English School District bills out at a substantial $400 per hour to the province. And to put that in context, that's $3,200 for a standard 8-hour day.
And it still hasn't been resolved. Carter uses ASL at home, but during a formative time, the 9-year-old is using few words at school. His parents have written an open letter to Education Minister Brian Waugh and invited Liberal leader hopefuls John Abbott and Andrew Furey to discuss the lack of support for the deaf community in schools. They say their son has spent his entire life unable to communicate with his classmates. Andrew Hawthorne, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, after an exhausting 4 days, Canes Quest frontrunners have crossed the finish line, though tragically for one team, it was also the end of the line. Here now's Meg Roberts joins me now. So Meg, a lot happening today. Let's start this off.
Yeah, well, it was a day of triumph and for others, heartbreak. Many are monitoring Brian Rich, the rider who was injured on the course earlier today. I'll get to his situation shortly, but first, the moment of a lifetime for Team 21, the Mighty Haulers.
Ladies and gentlemen, your Canes Quest 2020 champs, Team 21!
This is the first time they've ever raced in Canes Quest, an amazing feat. Daryl Burdett is from Cartwright. He passed through his hometown Monday and was greeted by a very excited group of fans. His partner Roderick Pye is from Lodge Bay. Both are fishermen. In second place, Team 50, Murray O'Brien and Blair Roberts, both from Lanzaloo, and both veterans of the race. In the final stretch, they made a gutsy move and took a different path than the teams in first and second place, but it paid off. Finally, in third place, Team 2, Boyd Lavers and Tyson Ryan from Port Saunders, both veterans of the race as well. Here's Daryl Burdett.
Did you think you were going to be coming in first?
No, not a clue. No, never ever expected that.
What's going through your head right now?
Job to believe us. Job to believe it. Holy God, I would never thought this when we started out.
You never thought?
No, sir.
What's it like to bring it home to Labrador?
Oh, good. That's the best part of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously smiles there, but Meg, as you mentioned, it was not all victories and celebrations today.
No, unfortunately, last night we brought you the story of Brian Rich and his uncle. They were racing in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Also for Brian's mother, who passed away not even a month ago. Brian Rich was in an accident this morning on the sea ice about 10 kilometers outside of Hopedale. He was taken to hospital by helicopter. You know, I sat down with him right before he left. He was so excited to go through his home community of Natwashish, and that was actually supposed to be his next stop right before the accident. Now, a post by his partner on Facebook says Brian is awake and he's talking. Now, as you can imagine, a massive race requires a massive effort. Before this year's Canes Quest got underway, I caught up with some of the organizers. It's been 14 years since the first courageous snowmobile racers blazed across Labrador in what is now known as Canes Quest. A lot has changed since then.
Very little tracking, no communications. It was just, you know, guys out through the country.
There were only a few dozen teams entered in that first race and far fewer volunteers. This year, 50 racers registered in a record-breaking 18 days. 2 all-female teams, more Indigenous teams than ever before, and hundreds of people tuning in from across the world. Organizers could not be happier.
Amazing, amazing. What we started out that we never thought was going to become anything is now is worldwide, and it's in an international race. It's fantastic, it's unbelievable.
The race was founded by Todd Kent, who worked with the Department of Tourism. His vision, to promote Labrador and make the big land feel smaller. Standing at the start line this year with a roar of engines and cheering fans, he's confident Canes Quest has done exactly that.
Friendships that have been made, learning about different cultures and the people and the communities, and now there's friends like. And not only that, people are traveling back here in the off-season. They're coming back in the summertime. They're coming back on the winters that there's no Canes Quest, and they're doing some snowmobiling or scouting or whatever. So there's so many good things about it.
Now we're still waiting for the other riders to cross the finish line. Racers have 18 hours once the first team crosses. Now, a lot of eyes on Team 39 tonight, one of the first ever female teams to compete in the race. They've passed the checkpoint in Nain. The women's Finland team has scratched due to issues with their machines. Now, more than half the racers have scratched, which just speaks to how serious a race like this really is. Reporting for Here and Now, I'm Meg Roberts.
Don't lie, this is still unequivocally the best project to deal with what had to be done that was available.
Facing the heat, former Nalcor head Ed Martin comes to the Here and Now studio to face questions about yesterday's damning Muskrat Falls report and the part he played in making Muskrat Falls happen. Okay, we're getting into pothole breeding weather. Really cold this morning, and then this afternoon, melting everywhere, at least here in the Avalon.
Yep.
And that's when starts to happen.
That's exactly when it starts to happen, and I guess we're right in on
Freeze
that
thaw.
trend. Yeah, we're absolutely on that trend. Yeah, it was chilly this morning for parts of the island. Let's take a look at where we were sitting. -10 in Corner Brook, -8 in St. John's, but that was overnight because those temperatures really jumped up, as Anthony just mentioned, through the day today. -20s continuing for Labrador, but as we look at the current temperatures into the minus teens, or -12 rather, for Lab City. And then single-digit temperatures on the plus side of the mercury for eastern Newfoundland. That's why we saw things change over to rain today. 2 degrees in St. John's right now, and then minus single digits for the rest of the island for the most part. sitting at about -3 for Corner Brook. So that area of low pressure is making its way offshore. It will continue to do so, but not before we see some more showers and chance of flurries overnight tonight. But that colder air very much in place up through Labrador. Once this low moves off, that cold air is going to sink a little bit further south. And we're going to see things change over to the potential for some flurries through the night tonight, certainly along the west coast. Otherwise, we should actually start to see some partly to mostly cloudy skies tonight. And then we're going to continue to see some flurries up through coastal Labrador. Otherwise, a pretty quiet evening for the majority of us. But again, those temperatures are going to dip back down below zero. So -10 will be the overnight low in Corner Brook. The winds are going to ease for you in Lab City, -28 overnight tonight with that chance of flurries continuing. Kept the chance of flurries in essentially for all of Labrador. Winds generally light along the coast, and then west coast 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. Not overly impressive, but still a little bit breezy overnight tonight. Winds out of the west for the rest of us, 30 to 50 kilometers per hour, but you'll notice those temperatures will certainly, or rather the winds will certainly ease by tomorrow morning. So tomorrow, pretty unsettled for the most part. We will see peaks of sun though through the day certainly, but not before we see the potential for some flurries into the afternoon. Continuing really across the board. And then coastal Labrador, you're looking at the winds picking up for you. So we do have some snow and blowing snow through the day tomorrow. The amounts look like they'll be somewhere between 10 to 15. Some areas, especially in the higher elevations, could see 15 to 20 centimeters. But again, with those winds, we have a special weather statement in effect. And Hopedale, you're looking at that blowing snow advisory. So definitely keep that in mind for tomorrow. Otherwise, those temperatures are going to dip back down below zero by a few degrees. Again, those winds generally light 15 to 20 kilometers per hour through the day tomorrow. Even though I kept the flurries in the forecast, we will more than likely see a few peaks of sun through the day. Same thing through central, -3 for Grand Falls, Windsor, -2 along the south coast with some sunshine through the day. And then again, onshore flurries possible. West northwesterlies 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, but sitting in those -single-digit temperatures. Mary's Harbour -5 tomorrow, so quite mild, -8 in Cartwright with those winds out of the west. And then mild air continuing for Happy Valley, Goose Bay -8, but Lab City are going to drop down to those -teens. Northwesterlies 10 to 15 kilometers per hour. We got that ridge of high pressure keeping those temperatures cold. And as we head into the weekend, we do have another warm up on the way. I'll have all those details coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, anybody expecting a mea culpa from Ed Martin will be disappointed. The former head of Nalcor stands by his decision to push forward and go ahead with the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric development. In fact, Martin is striking back, saying the scathing report is unbalanced. Here's more from his interview with reporter Terry Roberts.
I've been in this type of business for well over 40 years, large project, large companies, decision making, big projects, etc. I've always conducted myself ethically in the best interest of whatever project I was undertaking. Did the same here and feel very comfortable with that. One example which concerned me, within the report itself was the suggestion that we did not inform the Premier and the board of directors of a change in the cost at financial close. So you got sanctioned, then financial close a year later. At financial close, cost went from 6.2 to 6.5 billion. And there's a suggestion that we didn't communicate that. It didn't make sense to me. I looked at the contents of the report, which said senior bureaucrats were aware of it, said the independent engineer was aware of it, the federal government was aware of it. In Premier Dunderdale's own submission to the inquiry, in there it's clearly stated, and I made the reference in the document I provided, that she said that she was clearly aware of that change prior to financial close. This is a project that is going to impact the people of the province for many, many years. I'm a member of this province. I'm a person, I live in this province. I love this province. Like it's sort of, I can't understand where people are coming from thinking that we would take advantage of somebody or do something untoward. Like, it doesn't make any sense. There's no reason or rationale for doing it. People need to understand the balance. That's all I'm saying. And I've been clear on that from the outset. Let's look at the cost of the project. It's gone from 6.2 to 10.1 billion. I believe it should have been 9, and I've mentioned that, but it's at 10.1. That's not good. That's not acceptable. It's unfortunate. It's going to drive rates to a difficult place. That's a key element. But also, let's make the point, there is returns built into this project to help mitigate those rates. We are still positioned for 2041 to, from a negotiating perspective. Now we have established 2 routes to market, and we've served notice to Quebec that we are prepared to talk, obviously, but we are in an entirely different strategic perspective. You put all those together, that's all I'm asking the people to say. I'm not here being unreasonable by any means. I'm saying you have to look at the balanced view, make sure the rates are looked after properly for the people, but when you look at it in the full context of where this is going to go over time, it's still the right project. Decisions had to be made to deal with an aging Holyrood and the fact we need more power. Now, one thing that's not acceptable is putting our head in the sand and letting the lights go out. Another thing that's not acceptable is not making a decision. No decision is a huge decision. So I'm sitting back saying, I'm comfortable. Decisions had to be made on the basis of everything I've explained and a full suite of benefits. You have to look at the broad picture. This is still the right project. The right decision was made. You cannot look at a snapshot. You have to look at what we need. We need more power. We need to replace Holyrood. We need to protect the people over the long term. And when you add up the numbers and look at this thing over the right time frame, add it to the fact that there is the ability to mitigate rates in the short term, which is the most critical part for people. Put that together, the numbers don't lie. This is still unequivocally the best project to deal with what had to be done that was available.
Up next, CBC News pulls back the curtain on REACT's sudden shutdown. Well, March is Multicultural Month in Newfoundland and Labrador, but after a key organization shut down last fall, there's a gap in services. The Refugee and Immigrant Advisory Council, or REAC, suddenly closed its doors in November after decades of service in the province. Here now, Cease Hare has obtained new information about what was happening behind the scenes.
No one appreciates the contribution of the Refugee and Immigrant Advisory Council more than Muharrem Kemaoglu. He and his family moved from Turkey to St. John's almost 2 years ago.
I feel very confident when I went to REAC. They gave really good information about life at St. John's and also about Canadian culture. And people who went there getting easily adapted to life, their daily life here at St. John's.
He is one of about 1,300 people who used the nonprofit services in 2019. REAC has been helping immigrants and refugees adjust to life in Canada since opening nearly 36 years ago by offering language classes, advocacy, and a sewing program. In September, the group had a project approved by the provincial government to set up a new entrepreneurial program. But behind the scenes, a crisis was brewing. Jose Rivera served as REAC's executive director for 14 years. According to documents obtained through Access to Information, he reached out to the province in early November for help with a funding application, looking to hire a consultant to develop a long-term plan to deal with REAC's financial instability. Then 3 days later, a note appeared on REAC's door, services suspended until further notice. Rivera called the Provincial Office of Immigration and Multiculturalism that day about the group's internal crisis. In an email, he later said, "We feel we may be unable to fulfill our obligations as per our contract in the short term." 3 weeks later, Rivera officially announced that REAC would be closed for good, saying, sadly, there wasn't enough investment to keep the dream going. It wasn't the first time the organization fell on hard times.
It is bad in the sense that for the first time we are facing the possibility of closing.
A fundraising campaign saved the organization in 2015. Then, 2 years later, another financial crisis.
If nothing works and there's no money and there's no space, then we will have to just fall back and just disappear, because there's no way for us to keep going. I will keep helping people on my own, but not as an organization, because no space, no money, it's really hard to do that.
Last fall, CBC News first reported on inconsistencies in how REAC was governed. 2 people listed as board members since 2016 said they hadn't been to a meeting since then, even though Rivera filed documents with the Canada Revenue Agency saying they were still on the board, something that raises red flags for charity experts.
For example, in that form it says it's a serious offense under the Income Tax Act to provide false or deceptive information. So if a person were to say we have 15 board members and in fact there was only 2 board members, that would be potentially false or deceptive information.
In 2019, REAC received more than $137,000 from the province for programs and wage subsidies. And in the 7 weeks before it closed, almost a third of that cash, about $43,000, was handed over. Questions were raised in the House of Assembly.
I certainly cannot comment on the status of REAC's decision to suspend their services. Officials have certainly been in contact with the organization and requested official updates.
Good job.
Muharrem Kemaoglu says he's lucky. He has already adapted to life here in Newfoundland, but he worries about others coming to the province.
There is no chance to reach these services, and REAC was doing really good job for immigrant people like me. Don't have permanent residence. So there is a really big gap.
Jose Rivera has denied multiple interview requests. When he submitted documents to dissolve REAC as a provincial nonprofit, he said the money was gone. The equipment, the furniture, the supplies had been donated. The province says it is speaking with Rivera, going over financial statements and project records, and will soon comment. Cease here, CBC News, St. John's.
I'll set that record straight, and I'll be...
Tonight on our series that looks at repurposed churches, from the altar to the audiences, we'll take you to English Harbor. Shut down by the church, but saved by the community. For our fifth and final installment of our Repurposed series, video producer Mark Cumby takes you to what's now known as the English Harbor Arts Centre.
You're in the beautiful community of English Harbor in All Saints Anglican Church. All Saints Anglican Church was built in 1898, and in 2004 the Anglican Diocese had only 4 families left to support this building, so they decided that they were going to close it. We took the building over and spent 3 years doing restoration, so now it's the English Harbor Arts Centre. When we first thought of it as an arts center, we thought of it as visual arts. We pictured painters here, and because it's a beautiful community, it's a good building, it has great natural light, plus the area itself is pretty wild and beautiful, so we knew that we could attract artists, and we did attract artists, but I don't even remember how we ended up having our first performance, but performers loved it because of the natural acoustics of the building.
This highway is a hammer, I'm a rusty nail.
For me, music is my religion, and to walk into an old place like this and know and feel the energy of 150 years ago, and then rechannel it and use it again. And I think it's just great. I see more and more of it happening. I'm really happy to be here in Newfoundland doing it. It gives me an alternative to play in a venue that sounds good, that isn't about selling alcohol.
Get up every morning, I make my empty bed, feathers in my pillow, feel like bullets in my head. I start to remember all the wicked words I said, and I wonder why I'm lying here alone.
As an artist, my role is to come in here and be rolled in like a hand grenade, and I'm supposed to explode. Now, if I explode in the middle of Wrigley Field, most people won't even hear it. But if I explode over on that little stage, it's going to have an effect.
And I'll set that record straight, and I'll be and all your sticks and stones are
I hope it continues to do exactly what we're doing. You know, to be a welcoming place for people, for artists, for visitors, and mostly for the people of the area to feel like it's theirs, to have a sense of ownership to the building. Because, you know, we don't own the building. We're just a charity. We preserve the building.
The weather update is brought to you by Belltone, your partner in better hearing.
Well, actually, my sense is today, at least here in the St. John's area, looking around, the snow is sort of taking a little bit of a hit with the warmer temperatures, higher temperatures. Is that going to continue in the next couple of days?
It is, actually. We're, you know, we're going to hang on to some cooler temperatures first, but then as we head towards the weekend, those temperatures are definitely
Slow,
gonna...
I hope, because we don't want it to happen too quickly.
No, exactly.
Okay.
Definitely not. Does anything happen? Yeah. Let's take a look at the forecast as we head towards Friday. And that big ridge of high pressure is going to be very much in place through the day on Friday. Now, we're probably going to see some flurries along coastal Labrador, but that high pressure is going to bring some cooler temperatures with it. And then as we head towards the evening, you can see that low starting to make its way in, and that's going to bring some cloud cover and eventually some snow for Lab West, and that will spread across the island and the Big Land as we head into the early morning hours on Saturday. So that's our next big weather maker at this point, but the temperatures on Friday, again, going to stay below zero, but with plenty of sunshine through the first half of the day, keeping some lingering flurries in for the eastern portion of the Avalon. -3 should be the afternoon high for St. John's. And then we're looking at those mild temperatures up through Labrador as well. Lab City -9, and then -5 for Happy Valley Goose Bay. -13 will be the afternoon high for Nain. Now, as this low continues to track across the island and eventually up through Labrador, we're going to see some snow. It looks like it will be heavy at times, and some blowing snow possible with this one as we see the winds pick up. And then for the island. So we're looking at the potential for some freezing rain with this one. Now, just how the exact track of the system, again, is still pretty far out, but we could see some mixing along the west coast in the morning hours and then eventually back over to snow. But it does look like most of the south coast and eastern Newfoundland, even towards central, might change over to rain through the day. And again, those temperatures are going to warm up with this one. But this low generally sticks around. So we are looking at some blowing snow, certainly up through Labrador, and then onshore flurries again with some snow making its way on Sunday a little bit further south as the trough or cold front will move through in behind that, sparking the potential for some flurries. But as we head into Monday, another ridge of high pressure sets up, which means we'll see a little bit of a not so much weather happening, it'll be quiet, but those temperatures are going to drop again through the day. So here's where we'll be sitting temperature-wise over the next couple of days. Again, a roller coaster up above zero again for Saturday. Have that potential for some freezing rain in there at this point, and then dropping back down again Sunday and Monday. Overnight lows dipping, it looks like, into the minus double digits into the beginning of next week. Now for central Newfoundland, sunshine on Friday, and then we get unsettled for the weekend. Have your temperature up above zero as well, and then dropping back into Sunday and overnight Sunday into the -teens. So you're going to see that happen a little bit earlier. For western Newfoundland, temperature at this point on Saturday, have it above zero again. Chance of some drizzle at this point, and then dropping back down in those temperatures both Sunday and Monday. And then for eastern Labrador, hanging on to the minus single digits right across the board, it looks like into Monday, -7 will be the afternoon high. And then for western Labrador, you're looking at temperatures to the minus double digits tomorrow, and then by the time we get into the weekend, still hanging on to those minus single digits. So that's a look at your forecast. I'll have your weather photo when I come back.
Thanks, Asha. Cruise ships have been singled out as especially at risk for spreading the coronavirus, more germ boat than love boat. Ottawa is warning Canadians that if you are planning a cruise, skip it. Stay on land. The CBC's Jonathan Gatehouse explains why.
Today is February 19.
How dangerous was the coronavirus outbreak aboard the Diamond Princess in February? A new study modeling the onboard epidemic reaches some sobering conclusions. It started with a single passenger and quickly ballooned to a rate of infection 4 times that of Wuhan, China. Left unchecked, the study suggests the disease would have eventually touched 79% of those on board, some 2,900 people. However, researchers also say that if everyone had been evacuated from the vessel when the first cases were discovered, the outbreak could have been contained to just 2%, or 76 people. More than 600 people did get sick and 7 have died. The study concludes the key factor was the ship itself. A floating petri dish where people from all over the world spend weeks in tight quarters, putting their trust in the cleaning staff and everyone else's hand hygiene.
I would probably not advise anybody to go on a cruise for the foreseeable future until the situation settles down.
Yet the cruise industry says that it's safe, that they're initiating a bunch of new safeguards to make sure that everyone on board is healthy. I mean, It's a mixed message. Who should people believe at this point?
Given what we've already seen in the last few weeks, I think that it's a very difficult standard to meet.
Some experts say the coronavirus crisis points to a need to reimagine the spaces where we work, play, and travel, such as using materials that can better withstand vigorous cleaning.
If I told you that your cruise ship was going to have a vinyl headboard, you might not think that sounds really luxurious, but I assure you there are properties that we can put into vinyl now that allow it to be both comfortable, luxurious, and safe.
The cruise industry is trying to weather the storm, making it easier to cancel and rebook while slashing prices. The question is, what will win out with consumers? The lure of a bargain vacation or warnings from public health officials? Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, 2 subway trains collided in Mexico City today, killing 1 person and injuring another 41. 25 people were treated at the scene of the crash. The remainder were taken to hospital. Nobody had life-threatening injuries. The authorities say the drivers of both trains were among the injured, and one of the trains apparently backed up into the other by accident. An official investigation is now underway.
Everyone enjoys
Aww.
the sunshine in March, especially when we get a beautiful day. I'll tell you where this is too when we come back.
Now, I did see the sun kind of pop up this afternoon, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, very briefly, but the picture that you have for us got lots of sunshine.
Lots of sunshine in there. Take a look at that gorgeous photo.
And a sunbather as well.
Apparently, he slithered off into the water. He was there for a little while and then slithered off into the water.
Like the seal was in motion.
Yes, this is taken along the East Coast Trail in Bay Bulls.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Kathy sent us that photo. And again, we all enjoy the March sun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, really any sunshine is nice.
And the spots are in just the right place for a really nice set of boots.
Oh boy.
All right.
Oh, well, if you have any weather photos that you want to share with us, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca, and we'll try and get them on the show for you.
I'm only kidding, Kathy. Or am I? Beautiful shot, and I'm glad that he swam off before anything untowards could happen to that seal.
Yeah.
Send us your pictures.
Yes.
We had some really good ones lately, right?
We've had some beautiful photos. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the sunshine being back, or at least the longer days
It's
coming
true.
back.
When we leave here, it's not pitch
It's
black
not
anymore.
pitch black anymore. How exciting is
All
that?
right, well, let's go enjoy that now
Okay.
for the few minutes we can.
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow evening on Here and Now.
Good night.